So, as you may have guessed, not all software serves a righteous purpose. Of course, there are pieces of program, there are programs, sorry, I should say, that serve a harmful or negative purpose, sometimes even illegal. We call these pieces of software malware, which is short for malicious software. So malicious software, its purpose is to be harmful, or its purpose is to cause problems or issues. And there's a lot of different forms of malware out there. Viruses, for example, these are ones that they spread just like a regular human virus. They spread through someone's email contact list. So, for example, if you get a virus, it goes through your entire contact list and sends itself out to everybody on that contact list. Then it sends itself out to everybody on each one of their contact lists. So you can imagine how fast this spreads, exponentially, even more so. And so virus, that's where they get their term. And usually these viruses, they cause a number of different issues. It might be something simple as taking over your web browser, but it could be very malicious. It could be something that causes your hard drive to erase, or it might be something that changes all your extensions on all your files, so you try to open an image, but it tries to open it in Word, for example. A Trojan horse, software that opens access to your computer from another computer. So you go to a website and something gets installed in your computer. It might be a Trojan horse. And think of this kind of like a back door. And basically, it's like you leaving your door unlocked to your house so somebody can just walk in. And that's what's happening. They're getting access to your computer so they can look at your files, steal information, or do a number of other things. Sometimes even take control of your computer. Spyware and adware, we put these together because they are similar and sometimes very directly related. So software commonly contracted through visiting untrusted websites, you get this a lot. Spyware is used to steal your personal information, things like phishing software that take like your username, your password, sometimes your credit card information, all that kind of stuff. Adware, on the other hand, is the idea of bombarding you with different advertisements. And in the late 90s and the early 2000s, this was a big problem, really big problem, until web browsers started including things like pop-up blockers and things like that. It got to the point where a lot of people just stopped using the internet because it was so frustrating. You would visit one website and all of a sudden like 50 pop-ups, and you'd spend more time clicking the X's on the pop-ups rather than visiting the website. So people just literally stopped until solutions came about. And originally it wasn't web browsers with the pop-up blockers. A lot of times it was like the antivirus scanners and stuff like that would build that kind of tool into it. So how do we prevent this malicious software from getting on our computers? Well, we got to think of it in stages: before, during, and after. So before means how do we stop it before it ever gets onto our computer? So avoidance. Do not open files or visit websites that seem fishy or that you don't trust. So if somebody sends you a link to something, if you don't trust that person, don't open it. Or if the way that email or that message was sent to you doesn't sound like the way that person speaks or writes, don't open it. Or contact them and say, hey, was this really you? Did you really send me this link? I'm just not sure. During. So while you're browsing the web, look at that website address. Does it look like it makes sense? So when you're going to Google to search for something, is it google.com or google.ca at the top? Or is it like g.oogle or something like that? Something that doesn't make sense. You got to be careful. Now let's assume that you already have it. Well, that's another thing. So then you need something to remove this malware from your computer, and usually that's in the form of some sort of virus protection software. Remember, that's McAfee, Norton, AVG, a whole bunch of other ones. There's tons of free ones out there, as well as paid ones. But your goal is you got to keep it up to date. These pieces of software, they work kind of like dictionaries, and they look for chunks of code that matches things that they recognize. And these are typical virus type entities that they're used to seeing. And if they keep seeing it, they're like, uh-oh, that's a virus. So then they flag it, they tell you to quarantine it or delete it or whatever. And the way that they keep up to date is they update their dictionary they update their definition, so they add more and more things that they recognize. So these applications, they can scan your computer for viruses, they can warn you when you're visiting websites saying, hey, that's not a trusted one, or like when you open an email, it can say, are you sure you want to open this? That has a file that you may not trust. So that's how we prevent malware from ever taking place. So how can we maintain our computer to make sure that it's always running at optimal conditions? Now, first I got to clarify something. Now, almost everybody starts to eventually complain that their computer is running too slow. And inevitably they blame it on either viruses or their hardware or anything like that. Usually the truth is neither. Usually the truth is your stuff is just, it's working as fine as it always was, but the requirements of newer products and newer websites and whatnot is more demanding. So your stuff works as well as it always did, but the new things that you're dealing with require more. So your stuff just isn't up to spec to handle that stuff. So it's not like it's running slower, it's just other things need more. Okay, so instead of getting from point A to B on a certain amount of gas, it now takes twice as much gas to get there. That's just the way it is, because things like websites nowadays, they have a lot more media and content and things like that. So if you don't have the bandwidth like on your internet to actually handle that, you're not going to be able to visit it as fast. It's going to take you more time. But there are ways of making sure that your computers are well maintained. So much like anything else, with proper maintenance, software can become obsolete and unusable. So we got to make sure our software is maintained, as well as the computer itself. So you've all been using a program that seems like it has slowed down over time, and again, that's, like I said before, usually that's just it's more demanding. So they can be fixed by always keeping your software up to date. So there's patches, like your operating system. Windows always has patches. Usually most people have their operating system set to auto update. Sometimes it might say get my approval to update, but usually you're going to give your approval for your operating system to update. Most programs will have like a patching or an update system where it tries to keep you constantly up to date. So you need to download those patches whenever possible. Make sure like your virus definitions are always up to date as well for your virus scanners, your virus protection software. Everything needs to be maintained. Again, very important for operating systems because it ensures the system will run smoothly as possible and everything is compatible, because there's always new hardware coming out. So the operating system needs to communicate or know how to communicate with all this new hardware. So you got to make sure that your operating system is up to date at all times.